I've worked 55 homicides in 6 years. This case stands out because you don't know if you're gonna be able to tell the family, I have the answers.
I'd like to see that reporting a missing person. I have her 2 children with me.
So she left the kids?
Yeah, this is not like her.
For those most affected by a homicide.
As a mother, every day, the goal is to get home to your kids.
The first 48 is just the beginning.
Looked like maybe some blood on the back seat.
Everything pointed to something very bad happened to Tammy Wedgeworth that night.
She had a family. She has children.
All I thought about was, I can't give up until he tells me where she is.
This is the story of the fight for justice.
The jury believed that he was so high that he didn't know what he was doing that would completely derail our trial.
It might possibly mitigate the sentence to outright acquittal.
In the weeks, months, and years.
For please.
I'd like to see that reporting a missing person. It's my ex-daughter-in-law, and she left Saturday evening about 9:30, 10 o'clock. She went over to Mobile to visit somebody, and she wasn't back yesterday. I've called about 8 or 10 times. The phone's going to voicemail.
What's her name?
It's Tammy Wedgeworth, and I have her 2 children with me.
So she left the kids?
Yeah, this is not like her.
I will get an officer out to speak to you.
Four days later.
The missing person from Fairhope, she's been missing now for 5 days. As soon as she was reported missing, Fairhope PD got her cell phone history. It showed the phone died in Mobile. And so once they had that, they felt this was definitely something that Mobile police needed to investigate.
We hate that we brought this one across the bay to you.
Fairhope investigator Joshua Cryer and Sergeant David Hall will hand the case over to Barton.
Tammy Wedgeworth, she was reported on Monday.
44-year-old Tammy Battaglia Wedgeworth has been cleaning houses to make ends meet. She's a single mother of 3 sons, 2 under the age of 13.
As a homicide investigator, usually I know that there's a body. I know that there's going to be some sort of story to be told with the physical evidence, but you don't have that in a missing person.
And not knowing if she was dead or alive, it definitely motivates you to try to get her located so you can hopefully reunite her with her family.
And Monday, I talked to the father-in-law. He's like, is that a character? Friends say she was going to be 1 minute late. She would call. This is not right. She has no criminal history, no drug use, no mental health aspects to her life that seem out of place.
Investigator Cryer reached out to Miss Tammy's bank. The card had been utilized twice over in Mobile.
Here's a copy of the receipt.
Tammy's card was used at an adult entertainment store in Mobile the day after she went missing.
This is a copy of the video from NT Lingerie.
Okay.
The outside cameras showed Miss Tammy's vehicle pull up.
This female here does not appear to be Tammy.
The couple tries to use Tammy's credit card, but the clerk asks for ID.
You can tell he's digging for something, and then he comes in and he hands her the card.
They're driving around in Tammy's truck. They're using her credit card. I have to find out what their involvement is.
Using stills from the store's security video, Cryer compares the couple's faces to mugshots from an Alabama statewide database.
They first got us Amanda Miller's profile.
35-year-old Amanda Miller works at a gas station. She's a mother with a prior conviction for possession of a controlled substance.
They were actually able to go on Amanda's Facebook and identify the guy that she was with. He was wearing that same hat.
33-year-old Kenneth Colburn has prior convictions for assault, theft of property, and manufacture of a controlled substance.
We was able to then identify Kenneth's residence in Mobile area.
They then went back to the location, and in the driveway of that residence was the white pickup truck belonging to Tammy Wedgeworth that she was last seen in. So they detained Amanda and Kenneth for questioning.
Amanda and Kenneth are brought to Mobile Homicide.
I think we need to get Detective Johnson to do the search warrant on the residence in the truck from where we got Kenny and Amanda.
1 hour in.
We know that the truck and that address where the truck was found are all kind of connected to Kenneth. So we're trying to get all the information we can before we talk to Kenneth. Hopefully, Amanda is going to fill in some of the gaps.
What is Kenny in relationship to you?
I guess you call him my boyfriend.
Okay. For how long?
About a month.
Which vehicle was he drive?
Well, I got 150.
Whose vehicle was that involved to?
Kenny said he had purchased it from somebody. I don't know, he went out one night and come back, and I woke up the next morning.
You remember what night it was he went out?
It's around New Year's.
Do you remember going to a place, NT Lingerie?
Yes, sir.
We had such a clear understanding that she had used Tammy's credit card, and she probably knew that that was a crime. So we hit her with that right away.
What'd you buy there? That doesn't matter. We're grown-ups in here.
That's safe store.
How did you purchase that?
With the credit card. The one Kenneth had gave me.
All right. So, obviously, after y'all left that sex shop, you knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that you had just got finished using another female's card and stuff.
Yeah.
You could tell that she knew more than she was telling us.
Oh, but this is a lot bigger than a truck and a credit card. And I think you know that. I think deep down, maybe you've gotten some idea this is something different. So you need to be honest with me right now.
Kenneth Colburn was definitely considered a suspect at this point, along with Amanda. So we wanted to really get her to understand that she needed to tell the truth of what happened the night Tammy went missing.
We need to know if you, at any point, for any reason, met this woman that you have the idea.
No, sir, I've never met her.
What has he told you about that woman?
I mean, I've heard him talking to other people about a woman. Beat the woman up and took the truck.
Okay. The actual moment that you heard him starting to talk about this, you need to paint the picture for me.
It was a couple days later.
Okay.
We were at house.
She says they were hanging out with one of Kenny's friends when Kenny started talking.
What did you hear him saying?
He said he beat the woman up pretty bad, bloody. He left her side of the road and took her truck.
Does he say the woman's name?
No, sir.
And knowing all that from the jump, you, Amanda, are what? Cool with him just beating a woman up and then...
Scared.
Scared. Okay, I understand.
Because he put his hands on me before. Choking, because that's what he got me the other day.
She was afraid of Kenneth, and I could tell that she had her own past trauma that she clearly was dealing with.
Who else knows?
I know he talked to his mama and his stepdad.
All right, man, you're just gonna have to sit tight with us.
Amanda told us that Kenneth beat up a woman, so there was a possibility maybe she's just really hurt somewhere. And there are 2 other people that might have vital information about what happened to Tammy. I gotta go talk to those people now.
You wanna ice him? Yeah, I think we need to all go out there and interview everybody that we can.
We're saving him for last. We want to build a really good case before we confront Kenneth Colburn.
Detectives decide to hold Kenny while they search for the other witnesses.
I want the parents, sure. And we probably need to find...
They look up Kenny's friend.
Chickasaw. That's gotta be him, though.
And find his last known address.
You around me?
Yeah.
The team heads out to Kenny's parents' house.
Man. Are they doing the search warrant already?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Looked like maybe some blood on the back seat.
There has to be a reason for that blood to get there. And I believe that what occurred to Tammy to cause her to go missing happened inside that truck. Everything pointed to something very bad happened to Tammy Wedgeworth that night.
We definitely wanted to work with urgency. We wanted to try to locate her as soon as possible.
You in this back lane?
3 hours into the investigation,
Detective Barton was attempting to sit down and talk with Kenny's parents and get more information about what happened.
Obviously, we're here for a reason.
Barton meets with Kenny's stepfather.
Tell me what Kenny told you regarding how he got that truck.
He told me to face back and forth on the floor, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I finally called him out. I said, hey, what the hell are you pacing around here for like that? I said, what the heck said? What he said to me was, I killed somebody. I'm like, you what? I killed somebody and he was gone.
It was crazy to hear the stepdad say that so kind of like happenstance.
I read that he was just trying to boast something and I thought that was going to impress somebody or something.
Yeah.
I didn't take that much of it time. I said, kid, who are you supposed to kill? He said, some woman. I'm really starting to doubt, what he's telling me then. I said, how long you know? He said, about an hour. And I looked at him crazy, like he grew a third eye.
I realized the stepdad thought he was just talking like a crazy person. He said there were times where Kenneth would not be talking sanely.
Did he say how he did it?
He said he shot him.
This was new information because before that, we didn't know that there was a gun involved.
At this point, it's not just something that he said.
Oh my God.
Did he say where he was with her?
I think they were over.
The stepfather says Kenny told him he met the victim at a friend's house. The same friend detectives have identified.
All right.
We knew that there were more questions that needed to be answered, such as when did that happen, where did that happen, and why did it happen?
We're knocking it down.
Yeah, it's coming along.
The only odd thing is that the stepdad's saying he confessed to shooting her. Unless Amanda's just lying.
Here? It's gotta be right.
Here.
Right there.
8 hours in, detectives head to Kenny's friend's house in search of a lead on Tammy's whereabouts.
Mobile police. What's up, man?
Hey, how you doing?
Is here?
It's not here.
All right, I'm gonna write down my number. Tell him to give me a call because it is important we talk to him. All right?
All right.
Appreciate it.
Back at headquarters,
I think I need some more information.
Before I talk to you, Kenny, we need to get the truth from Amanda.
So we can interview her. As a strategy point, we felt like it might be a good idea to put some new faces in front of Amanda and go in a different direction with her as far as the interview, just to see if she knew where Tammy was located. We've been out talking to several other people, and some of the things that we've learned gives us the feeling that you're not being completely truthful. So spill whatever you haven't spilled and do it now.
I was not with Kenny that night. I stayed at his parents' and slept. He got back early in the morning. When he got back, he come inside and got me. And he had squirted water hose in the truck. There was a lot of blood inside the truck.
Front seat, back seat?
The whole front of the truck, there was blood everywhere. I asked him what had happened, and he told me that he had shot a woman
Okay.
to get the truck.
that further helped us paint a picture of, okay, this shooting happened in the vehicle most likely, which would have put Kenneth in the vehicle as well. And at that point, we thought that Kenneth is involved in the murder of Tammy.
Was her body in the truck?
No, sir.
The interview with Amanda was a turning point, but we didn't know what led to the shooting. And then, of course, where is Tammy?
Did he tell you where the body was?
No, sir.
Did he have a gun?
When he come back, yeah, he had a gun.
Handgun?
Yes, sir.
What'd he do with it?
He had took it and he was gonna try to burn it. And I told him, I said, you can't burn a gun. So the next day, he sold it to some little white boy. I don't know his name.
I have a hard time believing you don't know where the body is.
There's a female that's dead because of your boyfriend. Right. Do you know if this girl had kids?
I don't know. I don't even know who's here.
I think it hit home for her to think about her own kids and what would somebody do for her? Would they do the right thing and find her body for her kids?
She does have kids. They ain't heard from their mama in about 6 days.
Thinking about her kids. You can't do anything for this lady's kids. At least show her what her body is. What did he say to her out there?
He never said it.
9 hours into the investigation.
If I knew where she was, I would tell y'all. I'm broke.
Anytime that we're interviewing an individual that is in a relationship with a suspect, there's always that thought that, okay, maybe this person may not give us everything that they know out of fear.
I think in the back of Amanda's mind is if Kenny ended up leaving this building, I may be the next victim.
All right. Wait a second.
I think that Amanda is just a victim of her own circumstances. Dealing with domestic violence, it doesn't excuse the fact that she used Tammy's credit card after she went missing, but at the end of the day, I believe that Amanda Miller did not have anything to do with Tammy's disappearance.
9 hours in, before detectives interview Kenny,
Other guys here.
his friend comes forward.
All right, my name is Nick. All right, this is Jermaine.
We knew that Kenneth was at a friend's house, and that's where Tammy was. But we didn't know why she was there. Was she there to meet Kenneth?
What do you want to say about why you're here?
I mean, I'm home with Story Grows Tall.
Okay. Who's your homeboy?
Kenny, Colin.
What's this woman's name?
Tammy something. I met her on the Facebook date now.
Kenny's friend says he and Tammy started chatting online.
She actually just hit me up. And then his mind was like, I can get away, I'm going out there.
Okay. So she comes to your house?
Yeah.
Who all's there?
Kenny's.
Kenny's friend helped us establish this is how Kenneth and Tammy came to be in contact with each other that night.
So she comes over, and then what?
When she come over, and we sat down on my couch for a second, and I wasn't feeling it. I got like I was on the phone, went out the back door, went over to the neighbors. She just wasn't what she looked like in pictures. She's messing me up, and I didn't answer her back. But I never said nothing back to her for a while, and she finally messed me and said, I'm fixing to leave. But when she left, I didn't know Kenny was going with her.
So he apparently left with the Tammy chick?
Yeah.
Okay. Then when was the next time you saw Kenny or heard from him?
The next day, and he called me and said, don't be mad at me, bro. And I stole that girl's truck.
Did you know what vehicle he was talking about?
No. I know she pulled up in a white truck. I don't know for a fact he done nothing. Well, I feel like he done, but beat the bitch up.
Why do you feel that way?
Because he puts his fingers on women.
Why would you leave Tammy with a friend that you know beat on women? Why put her in that danger?
Hang tight, man.
The friend helped us establish that Tammy left with Kenneth in her vehicle, and I believe Kenneth most likely killed Tammy.
When you don't have a body, it's hard to charge somebody with something.
We hope that Kenneth would tell us, number one, where she was, and then obviously we wanted to know from him what happened.
10 hours in.
Hey, man. I apologize. I know you've been in here for a little bit. Basically want to ask you some questions.
I got no problem helping them get to do the wrong with that truck.
Cool. And what are we talking about? What kind of truck is it?
It's I want to say it's like a 05, 06, Ford F-150.
Run me down how you got the truck.
I went to the gas station.
Kenny says that a friend wanted him to repair Tammy's truck.
There's no one in the truck. Ain't nothing to do with him.
Do you know who his name was on that?
It was Tommy or Tammy or something.
Suspects like to separate themselves from the murder, but when you confront them with facts, they have no choice but to at least attempt to tell the truth.
We've talked to Amanda. We've talked to your stepdad. That truck was owned by a woman named Tammy, and you met her the night of January 1st. You were with Amanda while you were using the credit card. Is after you can sit there and you can deny it, but the situation is way bigger. What I'm trying to get you to understand is it's not about the truck. It's not about the card. It's about the woman that is missing.
I never met the woman. I did not do nothing. All you got me on is I got a stolen vehicle.
The woman is missing, and we have to find her. We have to be able to give her family some understanding and closure, man. I just want to know where Tammy is.
Yeah, I know.
That's her name, Tammy is. That's her name. She had a family. She has children. My job is to give closure to Tammy's family because I can't live with myself if I can't tell her family I found her. So I'm just trying to pull out some sort of humanity in Kenneth to get justice for Tammy.
I can't explain to you, sir, what happened. I don't know. But that's why I'm telling you, I'm not about to say, yeah, I killed her.
But you do remember.
I don't remember doing that.
Amanda said you came back with that truck, okay? And there was blood inside that truck. She asked what you did. You said, I shot her.
That's enough to convict me.
Kenneth, it's not about convicting you. You have an opportunity to take back the power and at least help me find this woman. I pled with Kenneth, but it got to a point where I played all my cards. Right now, there's a possibility we won't locate Tammy's body. And all I thought about was, I can't give up until he tells me where she is.
Y'all let me kiss my mama goodbye. You kiss my two ladies goodbye. I'll show y'all the exact where you're at.
You serious?
Let me kiss him goodbye. Hold him goodbye.
Okay. Give me 1 second.
11 and a half hours into the investigation.
I don't know how that just happened.
In all of my cases, I've never had anything where it just changed. Kenneth was finally willing to go somewhere deep down and tell me where Tammy is.
Let's go find the body and give her a kiss.
Here's what we're gonna do. You take me to where you're at in your head right now, and you'll be able to have as long as a goodbye as you want with those two girls. Okay, let's go.
I'm hoping that Kenneth told us the truth. But me and Nick, Sergeant Capro, we were kind of just like, he's just leading us on a wild goose chase.
Next road over by the bridge.
That way?
Yes. The body's right down there. Don't you get our license?
Can you give me like a 25?
I can't promise you.
I feel like I'm just myself.
When I got out of the vehicle, I felt a lot of stress. I needed to find Tammy Wedgworth. Kenneth said that Tammy's body would be inside a little gully. I'm looking, and I finally see a piece of plywood. I realized that a human being was just under the plywood.
She's here.
I know that's Tammy Wedgworth because you can see an identifiable tattoo. It felt like he just discarded her like a piece of trash.
4 days after Tammy was reported missing.
Hey, I need an unavailable unit to be started. The suspect just led us to the body.
I felt this just amazing relief.
Just knowing that her family can have some type of funeral for Tammy and not just be wondering where she is.
What I need from you is I need still to sit down and talk to you about it.
It was an accident. We was riding down the road, and I was telling her that then I had a pistol, you know what I'm saying? Trying to get rid of, trying to sell it. She said, let me see it, baby boy. So I pull it out. When I pull it out, I go to hand it to her. I'm handing it to her. It goes off. She falls on top of me. I panic. Throw her aside. I haul that if I go to the hospital. I went to the hospital. She's breathing again. Then it quit. When it quit, I panicked. Come here.
Did you pull the truck over kind of like where we're at?
Right, this is expo.
You went in the passenger seat and grabbed her?
She was still in the passenger seat. And when I throwed her over the thing right there, I said, my look, she's not going to be dead. And I pulled the trigger again.
Was she breathing or?
I think it was one of those crimes of opportunity, spontaneous decision.
You just gave me a full confession.
And Kenneth decided at that moment, I want her truck, I'll kill her for it, and that's what I believe he did.
Fairhope PD will notify Tammy's family that her body was found and an arrest has been made.
All right, man. I'll let you say goodbye. You are being charged with murder. Being charged with 2 counts of fraudulent use of a credit card. All right.
Kenny's girlfriend, Amanda Miller, is charged with fraudulent use of a credit card.
I'm going to make contact with the victim's mother. The family says she's very emotional. Hey, I'm Glenn. The male that we ended up arresting, he was able to not only take us to her, but also give us a full confession.
I mean, we're so grateful that you found her. We couldn't go the rest of our lives not knowing where she was.
The boys is going to be the hard part. I told them, I said, you know how Mommy hadn't come home this week? And they said, yes, ma'am. I said, Mommy won't be coming home. Mommy's going to be with God. God's going to take care of your mommy.
I got close with her family, just trying to encourage them, we're going to get justice.
All right, thank you so much.
Can I hug you?
Absolutely,
All right.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
But there's always more work to be done. So we passed the baton to the DA's office.
When I first heard of Tammy Wedgworth's body being dumped on the side of the road, it hit especially close to home because I have 3 boys myself. We wanted this case to be able to move quickly through the justice system. And so seeking life without the possibility of parole was the fastest way to get this case resolved. The homicide unit really built a strong case against Kenneth Colburn. Our possible strengths are the confession that Kenneth Colburn made to Detective Barton. We also have him on video using the victim's credit card, the victim's truck in his possession, Kenneth Colburn had made statements to Amanda Miller about shooting the victim. We also have the defendant's friend who was going on the blind date with Tammy Wedgeworth.
But the defense has a strategy that could change the direction of the case.
We learned that Kenneth Colburn had a history of methamphetamine use.
The public defender's office had been representing Kenneth Colburn, and they determined whether someone's using drugs to self-medicate or they're using drugs recreationally. It could be used to show a voluntary intoxication defense based on methamphetamine usage.
The defense was moving forward under the argument that the degree of intoxication amounted to insanity, and therefore you shouldn't find him guilty of capital murder. We have to prove that he had the specific intent to kill, and we have to have 12 jurors that all unanimously agree. I certainly felt concerned about whether we could get a conviction.
Tammy was a hardworking single mom. She was doing the best she could do to take care of her boys. When Tammy was killed, I was a single mom. And I think as a mother, every day, the goal is to get home to your kids. I think that Tammy was looking for a friend. She kind of found herself in a position where she was talking to strangers on the internet, and it led her to a dangerous place. I know that she would have given over the truck, would have given over her purse, whatever she had, to get back to her boys. I feel sad that her life was taken so senselessly, and Tammy's missing out, and her boys are missing out on time and life together.
This is the confession of Kenneth Colburn. Even though he does ultimately confess, he said that he was high on drugs and had no recollection of what happened due to the drug use.
I can't explain to you, sir, what happened. I don't know. But that's why I'm telling you, I'm not about to say, yeah, I killed her. But you do remember? I don't remember doing that.
That one statement right there, the I don't remember, if you take him at his word as the truth, that means the drug use could potentially be blocking his memory.
Even though Kenneth Colburn ultimately confessed, if a jury believed that he was so intoxicated or high that he didn't know what he was doing, then that would be detrimental to our case. So it's particularly important in confession cases to have other evidence to show the jury why they can believe what the defendant is saying.
With just 41 days to prepare for trial.
In order to corroborate Kenneth's confession, we had to look at witness cooperation. A lot of times witnesses tell police officers things, but testifying is a whole nother ballgame because they're in the courtroom in front of the defendant, the one that they're giving incriminating information against. A lot of times that affects their willingness to come forward.
ADA Davis felt that a second attorney was going to be beneficial. My role in this case was going to be to not only find our witnesses, but to also convince them that they needed to testify honestly. This is Kenny Colburn's best friend the night he was interviewed by mobile police.
When was the next time you saw Kenny or heard from him?
He messaged me the next day, or he called me and said, "Don't be mad at me, Ron. Smoke something for Troy."
What does it mean to you?
So Troy. I didn't know her until I think that day.
He was an essential witness for us because Kenny's friend is the link between Tammy and Kenny. But Kenny's friend was now incarcerated. He would be presented in court in front of the jury, in jail clothes, in shackles. We were concerned that that may sway a juror to think he would be trustworthy. Maybe he is the actual killer. Another important witness in this case was Kenny's stepfather.
I said, "What that said?" What he said to me was, "I killed somebody."
In what state did Mr. Colburn allegedly say this to the relative? Drug use, specifically methamphetamine use, is linked to paranoia. Those kind of things are what you examine the witness on to figure out whether or not this was a valid statement.
But then, a witness who wants to cooperate emerges.
A jailhouse informant contacted our office through his lawyer saying that he was housed with Kenneth Colburn and Kenneth Colburn had given him a full confession.
That's something that happens from time to time. People get bored in jail and they talk about why they're in there. And every once in a while, you'll have one of the inmates that'll come forward and say, hey, they told me some stuff and I'd like to tell y'all. So if for some reason the jury didn't believe Kenneth's confession to law enforcement was legitimate, the jailhouse witness would likely verify the confession. On the day of trial, we were about to start the jury selection process. Tammy's family is there. They've made arrangements to take off work and all their other obligations to be there.
Deputies were sent to retrieve Kenny's friend from federal prison. We had our jailhouse informant, we had Kenneth's family, so we were ready to go to trial that morning.
And then the defense says, we have a conflict with this and that they have something that they need to take up with the judge. So we were just totally caught off guard because it was going to be an issue that would completely derail our trial. On the morning of trial, Kenneth Colburn's defense attorney brought it to the judge's attention that the public defender's office had previously represented the jailhouse witness. They felt that that was a conflict of interest for them to continue to represent Kenneth Colburn on this case. We were totally blindsided by this because it seems like that should have been discovered at the time that that witness was tendered to them, not on the morning of trial.
The DA's office offers a potential solution.
We said we won't call that person as a witness, and then the conflict doesn't exist anymore.
But the defense reveals that they might want to call the jailhouse witness.
We felt it was a last-minute ditched effort to try to get out of this trial.
The judge listens to arguments from both sides and makes his ruling.
It was just very defeating knowing that we had everything ready to go and this defense attorney's getting off the case and we're starting completely over.
I was devastated for Tammy's mother. She's not in great health. She's been waiting for this day to get justice for Tammy. And now she's being told that this is not going to happen.
The prosecution and defense regroup for a new trial date.
After the public defender's office was conflicted out of the case, 2 private attorneys were appointed by the court to take over this case for Kenneth Colburn.
Getting into a case after the public defender's office, a lot of the work had been done, so we were able to focus on information that might possibly mitigate the sentence to where parole is possible or even an outright acquittal. The discovery is the information, the police reports, the audio video recordings, surveillance video, anything that goes into the prosecution of the defendant for capital murder. And what we look for are ways to suppress that information.
25 days before a new trial is set to begin.
We had another status hearing where Kenneth Colburn showed up in court and wanted to take a plea deal.
It was a pretty clear decision. You're left with a compelling confession that leads the authorities to the body. So this case would have been a very difficult case to go to trial with. So Kenneth Colburn pled guilty to simply reduce the charge from capital murder to regular murder.
Having this case resolved in a timely manner was the fastest way to get justice for Tammy's family. The plea deal that we offered Kenneth Colburn would be a blind plea. And what a blind plea is, you plead guilty, but the sentence is completely and totally up to the judge.
Which meant the judge could punish Kenneth at the bottom end, which was life, or the top end, which was life without parole. Kenneth Colburn did choose to blind plead. It was a calculated decision for a chance at freedom one day as an old man.
1 month later.
The whole point of the sentencing hearing is for the judge to hear everything from the state's perspective and everything from the defense's perspective.
This was the only time in my entire career in homicide that I ever spoke at a sentencing and gave my personal account of how the case affected me. And I just wanted to make sure that Tammy got as much justice as possible.
This was the victim impact statement that was given by Tammy's mother at the sentencing hearing for Kenneth Colburn. Tammy was a beautiful woman. Her boys are still living with the loss of their mother, as are we. They will never understand how you could do that to their mama. Your Honor, I ask that you impose the maximum sentence that you could impose on him so that what has happened to us never happens at the hands of this man ever again.
To see Tammy's mother get up in front of the courtroom and say everything that she's always wanted to say to Kenneth Colburn was incredible. You could just see a weight being lifted off of her.
In 20 plus years of doing this, Kenneth Colburn was one of the most remorseful people that I had ever met. He put it in his own writing. He told the judge this. He had accepted responsibility.
2 years and 3 months after Tammy was reported missing, Kenneth Colburn is sentenced.
The judge ultimately sentenced Kenneth Colburn to life without the possibility of parole.
He will be sitting there for the rest of his life thinking about that night he met Tammy and what he did. I think he got what he deserved.
Just the whole senselessness of it. It's kind of just sad. He could have just dropped her off at the hospital and took off, but Kenneth chose to bring her out here in a dark, lonely area and dispose of her. Hopefully people remember Tammy for the person she was, not for what happened to her that night.
I made a promise to Tammy's mother from the very beginning. I would be Tammy's voice, and Tammy would not be forgotten.
The diary was hidden for 40 years, buried beneath layers of dust inside an abandoned farmhouse in rural Wisconsin. It sat untouched while an entire community lived with a question that had no answer. What happened on the night Laura Bennett disappeared? For decades, investigators searched for the truth. They followed rumors. They chased false leads. They interviewed people who claimed they knew something. But every road ended in silence. The case became one of Wisconsin's most haunting cold cases, a mystery that refused to disappear, a name that remained on missing person lists year after year, a family that woke up every morning hoping for answers that never came, until one forgotten diary changed everything. The discovery was accidental, a property renovation, an old wooden floor being removed, a hidden compartment beneath the boards. Inside was a small leather-bound notebook. The pages were yellow. The ink was faded. The handwriting belonged to someone who had been gone for decades. But what investigators found inside was not a simple collection of memories. It was a confession hidden in plain sight, a secret that connected directly to one of Wisconsin's darkest unsolved mysteries. The year was 1980. The town of Blackwood, Wisconsin, was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. A quiet community surrounded by forests, farmland, and long empty roads. A place where people trusted their neighbors. A place where doors were often left unlocked. Nobody believed something terrible could happen there, until Laura Bennett vanished. Laura was 26 years old. She worked as a librarian at the local community center. Friends described her as intelligent, kind, and determined. She was the person people went to when they needed help. The person who remembered birthdays. The person who always answered the phone. Her disappearance shocked everyone who knew her. On the evening of October 14th, 1980, Laura left work shortly after 7 p.m. Security records showed nothing unusual. Co-workers remember her smiling as she walked out. She told them she planned to stop by a nearby store before heading home. It was an ordinary night. At least, that was what everyone thought. Laura never arrived home. Her car was discovered the next morning on a quiet road outside town. The driver's door was unlocked. Her purse was still inside. Her keys were missing. And on the passenger seat was a single piece of paper, a handwritten note, only 5 words. Something should stay hidden. Those words immediately changed the investigation. Police knew this was not a simple disappearance. Someone had left a message. Someone wanted people to know something. But what? And why Laura? The first days of the investigation were intense. Officers searched nearby forests. Volunteers walked through fields. Dogs searched areas surrounding the abandoned roads. The community came together. Everyone wanted to believe Laura would be found alive. But as days became weeks, hope began turning into fear. Investigators interviewed everyone connected to Laura, friends, co-workers, neighbors. They searched her personal records. They examined her phone calls. They looked into her relationships. And slowly, they discovered something unexpected. Laura had been investigating something before she disappeared. Something she had not told many people about. Several weeks before she vanished, Laura had started asking questions about an old property outside town, a farmhouse abandoned since the early 1970s, a place locals avoided, a place surrounded by rumors. Some said strange things happened there. Others claimed the property had been connected to a family scandal years earlier. Most people ignored the stories, but Laura did not. She had become interested in old records, old newspaper articles, old documents hidden away in town archives. She believed something from the past had never been properly explained, and investigators began wondering if that search had led her into danger. The abandoned farmhouse quickly became a major focus. Police searched the property. They found nothing. No evidence. No clear connection. Just an empty building filled with old furniture and forgotten belongings. The case slowly began losing momentum. Months passed. Then years. The headlines disappeared. The investigators moved on to other cases. The town continued living. But Laura's family never stopped searching. Her parents kept her room exactly as it was. Her mother refused to throw away her belongings. Her father kept every newspaper article about the investigation. Every anniversary of her disappearance, they returned to the road where her car was found, waiting for the answer they feared might never come. The case became a cold case, a file stored away, a mystery with no ending. But investigators did not know something important. The answer had already been written, not in police reports, not in witness statements, not in official records. It was written inside a forgotten diary, a diary hidden beneath the floor of the same abandoned farmhouse Laura had been investigating. And decades later, when that diary was finally opened, the first sentence inside would force investigators to reopen everything they thought they knew about Laura Bennett's disappearance. The first sentence inside the diary would force investigators to reopen everything they thought they knew about Laura Bennett's disappearance. Because the words written on that faded first page were not random memories. They were a warning. A warning from someone who had carried a secret for decades. The diary began with a date. October 12, 1980, 2 days before Laura vanished. And beneath the date was a sentence written in dark ink. I saw what happened at the old farmhouse. For investigators, those words changed the entire direction of the case. For 40 years, they believed Laura disappeared because of something she discovered. Now they had evidence that someone else had been watching too. Someone else knew the truth. Someone else had remained silent. The discovery of the diary happened during a routine property inspection. The old farmhouse outside Blackwood had been abandoned for decades. The roof had started collapsing. The wooden floors were damaged. The county planned to remove the structure before it became dangerous. Workers were clearing the inside when they discovered a loose floorboard in one of the bedrooms. Beneath it was a small hidden compartment. Inside was a leather diary wrapped in plastic. A strange detail immediately caught the attention of investigators. The plastic was not old. It had been replaced, meaning someone had accessed the diary after it was originally hidden. Someone had returned. Someone had known it was there. The question became obvious. Who and why? The diary belonged to Daniel Mercer, a name that appeared briefly in the original investigation. In 1980, Daniel was 41 years old. He owned a repair shop outside town. He was known as a quiet man, private, someone who rarely involved himself in community events. During the original investigation, police interviewed him because he had repaired Laura's car several months before she disappeared. But nothing connected him to the crime. His statement was simple. He said he barely knew Laura. He said he had no idea why she was interested in the old farmhouse. He said he had nothing to hide. The investigators at the time had no reason to believe otherwise. But now, 40 years later, his own handwriting was telling a different story. The diary contained dozens of entries. Some were ordinary, notes about work, weather, daily routines. But others described events connected to Laura, events Daniel had never mentioned. One entry from October 10th, 1980 immediately shocked investigators. She came asking questions again. She knows more than she should. The wording was disturbing because it suggested Daniel had contact with Laura shortly before she disappeared, a fact he denied. Investigators began reviewing every detail from the original case. They searched old interviews. They compared statements. And they found something that had been overlooked. A witness had reported seeing Laura's car near the farmhouse 2 days before she vanished. At the time, police considered it unrelated. Laura often drove around town. There was no proof she had entered the property, but the diary changed the meaning of that detail. Suddenly, the abandoned farmhouse was no longer a random location. It was the center of the mystery. Detectives returned to the property. They searched areas that had never been examined with modern technology. Using advanced equipment, they discovered hidden markings inside the walls. Small scratches, old symbols, notes carved into the wood. The kind of things investigators would have ignored in 1980. But now they look different. One marking contained initials, Elbe. Laura Bennett. The discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation because it suggested Laura had been inside the farmhouse, and she had left evidence behind. The detectives now faced a disturbing possibility. Laura had not simply disappeared. She had been searching for something, and she had gotten close enough to frighten someone. The diary revealed more. Daniel wrote about a secret involving the Mercer family, a secret connected to the farmhouse, a secret that had been hidden since the 1970s. According to the entries, the farmhouse had once been used for illegal activities, financial crimes, blackmail, hidden transactions. Daniel claimed he was not responsible. He claimed he discovered the truth years earlier, but he also admitted something worse. He knew people who were involved, people who had influence in the community, people who could make problems disappear. Investigators now wondered if Laura had uncovered information powerful enough to put someone in danger. The original theory had always been that Laura was a victim of a random crime, a wrong place, a wrong time, but the diary suggested something else. She may have been targeted. The investigation quickly became one of the largest reopened cold cases in Wisconsin. News outlets returned to Blackwood. The old headlines came back. The town that had tried to move on was forced to remember. Residents who had been silent for decades began speaking again. Some admitted they had heard rumors. Some admitted they knew Laura was investigating something. But they were afraid. Afraid of the people connected to the old farmhouse. Afraid of what might happen if they talked. The detectives realized the original investigation had not failed because there was no evidence. It failed because people were afraid to reveal what they knew. And now, after 40 years, the diary had opened a door that many people hoped would remain closed forever. But the biggest discovery was still waiting. Because hidden among Daniel Mercer's final diary entries was a name investigators recognized immediately. A person who had never been considered a suspect. A person who had helped search for Laura. A person who had stood beside the community while hiding a devastating secret. And when detectives uncovered that connection, the entire story of the Wisconsin 1980 cold case would change forever. The entire story of the Wisconsin 1980 cold case would change forever because the name written inside Daniel Mercer's diary was not the name of a stranger. It was the name of someone the community trusted. Someone who had appeared in newspapers during the original investigation. Someone who had stood in front of cameras and begged for answers. someone who had joined the search parties looking for Laura Bennett. The name was Thomas Caldwell. In 1980, Thomas Caldwell was one of the most respected men in Blackwood. He was a local businessman, a community volunteer, a person known by almost everyone in town. When Laura disappeared, Caldwell became one of the public faces of the search. He organized volunteers. He spoke with reporters. He attended meetings with investigators. He told everyone that the town needed to find Laura. For 40 years, people remembered him as one of the people who tried to help. But inside Daniel Mercer's diary, his name appeared again and again, not as a helper, not as a concerned citizen, as someone connected to the secret buried beneath the old farmhouse. The detectives stared at the pages for hours. They compared handwriting. They verified dates. They checked every detail. The more they investigated, the more impossible it became to ignore. Thomas Caldwell had been closer to the case than anyone realized. The question was no longer whether he knew something. The question was how much he knew. Investigators reopened every interview from 1980. They watched old recordings. They read every statement. And they discovered something strange. Caldwell's story had always sounded perfect, almost too perfect. He had an answer for every question. He knew exactly where to look during searches. He knew details about Laura's movements that police had never publicly released. At the time, investigators thought he was simply helpful. Now, they wondered if he knew those details because he was connected to what happened. A new team of detectives began rebuilding Laura's final days. They discovered that she had met with Thomas Caldwell shortly before disappearing. This meeting had never been mentioned in the original investigation. The information came from a retired employee at the community center. Her name was Evelyn Hart. In 1980, Evelyn worked with Laura at the library. She remembered seeing Laura upset during the final week. Laura had told her that she had found something disturbing, something connected to old records from the farmhouse. When Evelyn asked what it was, Laura refused to explain. She only said one sentence. "If something happens to me, look at the names in the old files." For 40 years, Evelyn carried those words, but she never shared them with police. Not because she did not care, because she was afraid. She explained to investigators that after Laura disappeared, Thomas Caldwell approached her. He asked what Laura had told her. He asked whether Laura had mentioned the farmhouse. When Evelyn denied knowing anything, Caldwell warned her not to involve herself. At the time, she thought he was simply trying to protect the investigation. Now she understood. He was protecting himself. The investigators returned to the old farmhouse with a completely different perspective. They were no longer searching for a missing person. They were searching for truth behind a decades-old secret. Forensic teams examined the property again. They scanned the walls. They examined the foundation. They collected samples. And then they found something that had been missed for 40 years. A hidden room. The entrance was concealed behind damaged wooden panels. The space was small, barely large enough for storage. Inside were boxes of documents, old financial records, photographs, letters, and one object that immediately caught investigators' attention, a cassette tape. The label was handwritten. Only one word appeared: Laura. The discovery changed everything. The tape was carefully transported to the forensic laboratory. Investigators gathered around as technicians restored the damaged recording. The first sounds were unclear. Static, background noise, a faint clicking sound. Then a voice appeared. Laura Bennett, alive. Speaking. The room became silent. Because for the first time in 40 years, investigators heard the last known recording of the woman they had spent decades trying to find. Her voice was calm, but there was fear underneath. She said she had discovered something connected to the farmhouse. She said she had found evidence that certain people in Blackwood had been hiding crimes for years. Then she mentioned a name: Thomas Caldwell. The detectives listened carefully. Every word mattered. Laura said she believed Caldwell knew she was investigating. She believed he had discovered her search, and she believed she was in danger. But the recording ended before she could explain everything. The tape was damaged. A section was missing. The most important part of the message was gone. Investigators now had a new problem. They knew Laura had uncovered a secret. They knew Thomas Caldwell was connected. But they still needed to know what happened after the recording ended. The diary, the tape, the hidden room, all of it pointed toward one conclusion. The original investigation had been looking in the wrong direction. For 40 years, they searched for a missing woman. But the truth was darker. Laura had not vanished randomly. She had been silenced. The community of Blackwood was shaken again. People who had known Caldwell for decades struggled to accept the possibility. The man they trusted. The man who helped organize searches. The man who stood beside Laura's family. Could he really have been involved? Investigators knew they could not rely on public opinion. They needed proof. And as they continued examining the hidden room, they discovered another item, a document dated October 14th, 1980, the exact night Laura disappeared. A document containing signatures, a list of names, and at the bottom of the page, the signature of Thomas Caldwell. The cold case that had remained frozen for 40 years had finally begun to move, and now investigators were closer than ever to discovering the deadly secret hidden inside the Wisconsin farmhouse. The deadly secret hidden inside the Wisconsin farmhouse was finally beginning to surface. For 40 years, the truth had remained buried beneath silence, fear, and carefully protected lies. But now the pieces were coming together. The diary, the hidden room, the damaged cassette tape, the document signed by Thomas Caldwell. Each discovery pushed investigators closer to the night Laura Bennett disappeared. And each discovery revealed something more disturbing. Laura had not accidentally uncovered a mystery. She had uncovered a network. A secret that involved powerful people in Blackwood, people who had spent decades making sure nobody looked too closely. The document found inside the hidden room became one of the most important pieces of evidence in the reopened investigation. At first glance, it appeared to be nothing more than a financial record. Numbers, dates, signatures. But forensic accountants noticed something unusual. The names listed on the document matched several respected members of the community from 1980. Business owners, local officials, people who had publicly supported the search for Laura, people who had stood in front of cameras and promised they wanted answers. Now their names appeared inside a document connected to illegal activity. The detectives realized the original disappearance investigation had focused too narrowly. They were searching for a person, but Laura had been searching for a secret that many people wanted to keep hidden. The investigators began tracing the history of the old farmhouse. They discovered that during the late 1970s, the property was used as a meeting place, not officially, not publicly, but according to recovered records, certain individuals gathered there to exchange money and information. The operation was carefully hidden. The farmhouse was isolated. The roads around it were empty. Nobody had a reason to visit. That made it the perfect place for secrets. And Laura had found it. She had found the documents. She had found the names. And according to the cassette tape, she knew she was being watched. The detectives returned to the audio recording again and again. They slowed it down. They enhanced the sound. They searched every second for missing information. The recording was damaged, but one moment stood out, a sound in the background, a door opening. Then Laura's voice became quieter, as if someone had entered the room. Then the recording ended. The question became unavoidable. Who was there with her? And what happened after the tape stopped? Investigators began looking at Thomas Caldwell's movements on October 14th, 1980, the night Laura disappeared. The original investigation had accepted his statement. Caldwell claimed he was at home that evening, alone, watching television. Nobody questioned it. But the new investigation discovered something different. A gas station receipt. A forgotten record from a small station outside town. The receipt showed Caldwell purchased fuel at 8:12 p.m. near the road leading toward the old farmhouse. The location was only 15 minutes away from where Laura's car was found. A detail that had never been connected before. Now it became critical. Detectives also discovered that Caldwell had lied about knowing Laura. During the original investigation, he claimed they had only spoken briefly, but witnesses remembered otherwise. Several people recalled seeing Laura and Caldwell arguing weeks before her disappearance. The argument was reportedly about documents from the farmhouse. Laura believed Caldwell knew more than he admitted, and Caldwell wanted her to stop asking questions. The investigation became a race against time. Even though 40 years had passed, detectives knew the evidence could disappear. Documents could be destroyed. Memories could fade. People who knew the truth were getting older. They needed answers quickly. The first major breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A former employee of Caldwell's repair business. His name was Richard Sloan. For decades, Richard had refused to talk about what he knew. But after hearing about the diary discovery, he contacted investigators. He said he had been waiting for someone to reopen the case. Richard told detectives that in 1980, he saw Caldwell at the repair shop late at night. The same night Laura disappeared. Caldwell arrived with something wrapped in a blanket. Richard said Caldwell looked nervous, terrified. When Richard asked what happened, Caldwell told him to forget what he saw. At the time, Richard was 23 years old. He was afraid of losing his job, afraid of making powerful enemies. So he stayed silent for 40 years. But the discovery of the diary changed everything. Richard finally believed the truth had a chance. His statement gave investigators something they had never had before, a witness placing Caldwell near the center of the investigation. But there was still one major question. Where was Laura Bennett? The hidden room contained documents, the cassette tape, the financial records, but no remains, no direct evidence explaining her final moments. The detectives knew the case was close, but close was not enough. They needed the final piece. Then forensic experts made another discovery inside the farmhouse. A section of the old wooden floor contained traces that had been overlooked in 1980. Modern testing revealed evidence that suggested something had happened there, something violent, something that confirmed Laura had been inside the farmhouse. The cold case was no longer just about missing evidence. It was becoming a homicide investigation. And as investigators prepared to confront Thomas Caldwell with the new discoveries, they uncovered one final entry in Daniel Mercer's diary, an entry written the day after Laura vanished. Only one sentence. I know what he did, but I was too afraid to stop him. The words left investigators with a chilling realization. Daniel Mercer was not just recording a secret. He was recording his guilt. And now, after 4 decades, his diary was finally telling the story he was too afraid to tell while he was alive. His diary was finally telling the story he was too afraid to tell while he was alive. And inside those pages was a confession that investigators had been searching for since the night Laura Bennett disappeared. Not a confession written by the person responsible, but a confession from someone who had watched the truth disappear and chose silence over justice. Daniel Mercer had carried the secret for 40 years. He had lived with the knowledge. He had written about it. He had hidden the evidence. But he never came forward. And now detectives had to understand why. The final entries of the diary became the focus of the investigation. Unlike the earlier pages, these were written differently. The handwriting was rushed. The words were uneven. It looked like Daniel was afraid someone would find the diary before he could finish. One entry dated October 15, 1980, the day after Laura vanished, revealed the first major breakthrough. Caldwell told everyone the story before anyone could question him. He knew exactly what to say. He knew exactly where to look. Investigators immediately recognized the importance of those words. Daniel was describing something they had already begun to suspect. Thomas Caldwell had controlled the narrative from the beginning. He was not just a person connected to the case. He was someone who shaped how people understood the case. For years, the town believed Caldwell was helping, but the diary suggested he was managing the investigation, controlling attention, directing people away from the truth. The detectives returned to the original police reports. They noticed a pattern they had never seen before. Many early searches had focused on locations suggested by Caldwell. Many interviews had followed information he provided. At the time, Investigators believed he was cooperating. Now, they questioned whether he was manipulating them. A chilling possibility emerged. The person helping search for Laura may have been the same person responsible for hiding what happened to her. The investigation team began examining every interaction Caldwell had with authorities after Laura disappeared. They found newspaper interviews, public statements, community meetings. In every appearance, Caldwell repeated the same message. We have to find Laura. We cannot give up. The truth will come out. But investigators now saw those words differently. They wondered if they were not the words of someone searching for answers. They were the words of someone trying to appear innocent. The reopened investigation attracted national attention. The phrase "forgotten diary exposes deadly secret" appeared in headlines across the country. People who had never heard of Blackwood suddenly knew the story. A missing woman, a hidden farmhouse, a trusted community figure, and a secret buried for 4 decades. But inside the investigation, detectives ignored the attention. They knew public pressure could damage a case. They needed facts. They needed evidence. They needed the truth. The forensic team continued examining the hidden room. They discovered more documents. Some were damaged beyond repair. Others contained information that changed the entire timeline. One document showed that Thomas Caldwell had access to the farmhouse long before Laura disappeared. Another showed that Daniel Mercer had attempted to distance himself from the property months earlier. The picture was becoming clearer. Daniel was not the person who created the secret. He was someone trapped inside it, someone who knew too much, someone who was afraid to speak. Investigators also uncovered evidence connecting Caldwell to Laura's research. A library record showed that Caldwell had checked out the same historical documents Laura had been reviewing. The dates were significant. He accessed the records shortly after Laura began asking questions. This suggested he knew what she was searching for. He knew where she was looking, and he knew she was getting close. The detectives now understood the danger Laura faced. She was not just investigating old crimes. She was investigating people who had spent years hiding them. The next major discovery came from the damaged cassette tape. Experts managed to restore a previously unheard section. Only a few seconds, but enough to change everything. A second voice appeared. A male voice. Low, angry. The audio was unclear, but investigators could identify one word. Stop. Then Laura responded. People deserve to know. The recording ended. Those 4 words became one of the most important moments in the entire case, because they confirmed what investigators believed. Laura was not running away. She was confronting someone who wanted her investigation to end. The team began preparing to question Thomas Caldwell, but before they could reach him, they discovered something unexpected. Caldwell was already gone. He had left Blackwood 2 days earlier. He sold his property, closed his business, and disappeared without explanation. The timing was impossible to ignore. A man connected to a 40-year-old cold case suddenly vanished after new evidence appeared. Investigators launched a search. They tracked financial records. They contacted former associates. They examined every location connected to Caldwell. But the man who had spent decades hiding secrets had disappeared once again. The case had reached another turning point. The evidence was finally speaking. The truth was finally emerging. But the person who could answer the remaining questions was gone. And somewhere beyond Wisconsin, Thomas Caldwell was running from a past he had spent 40 years trying to bury. But investigators knew one thing. The diary had changed the case forever. The secret was exposed. The silence was broken. And now, the search for the man behind the mystery had begun. The search for the man behind the mystery had begun. And for the first time in 40 years, investigators were no longer chasing shadows. They had a name. They had evidence. They had a timeline. But they also had a problem. Thomas Caldwell was gone. The man who had once been the face of the search for Laura Bennett had disappeared just as the truth was beginning to surface. Investigators moved quickly. They issued alerts. They contacted law enforcement agencies across multiple states. They searched locations connected to Caldwell's past. But every step forward revealed the same disturbing pattern. Caldwell had planned carefully. He had prepared for the possibility that someone might eventually uncover the truth. The detectives discovered that weeks before the diary was found, Caldwell had begun quietly selling his remaining possessions. Furniture, vehicles, personal items, everything that connected him to Blackwood. It was as if he knew the past was coming back. The question investigators could not answer was simple. How? How did Caldwell know the diary existed? How did he know someone would eventually find the hidden room? The investigation turned back toward Daniel Mercer. The diary became even more important. Detectives carefully examined every page, every sentence, every small detail. They discovered that Daniel had been afraid of Thomas Caldwell for decades, not because of threats alone, because he believed Caldwell had influence, power, connections, people who would protect him. Daniel's final diary entry revealed the fear he carried until the end of his life. I thought the truth would die with me. I was wrong. Those words became the emotional center of the investigation, because Daniel had believed silence would protect him. Instead, silence had allowed the secret to survive. The detectives realized the diary was not just evidence. It was Daniel's final attempt to correct his mistake. He knew he had failed Laura when she needed someone to speak, so he left behind the only thing he could, the truth. As investigators searched for Caldwell, they also reopened the question that had haunted everyone for decades. What happened to Laura Bennett after she entered the farmhouse? The evidence suggested she had discovered the hidden operation. She had recorded her concerns. She had confronted someone. But the final moments remained unknown. The missing section of the cassette tape became the biggest mystery. Experts worked for weeks trying to restore it. They examined the damaged tape layer by layer. They used technology that did not exist in 1980. And finally, they recovered another fragment, a few seconds. But those seconds changed the entire case. The recording continued after Laura's final statement. Her voice was quieter. She sounded frightened. Then a man spoke. The audio quality was poor, but investigators recognized the voice. It belonged to Thomas Caldwell. The words were not clear, but one sentence could be understood. You should have left us alone. The laboratory confirmed the recording had not been altered. The voice matched other available recordings of Caldwell from the 1980s. For investigators, this was the moment the case transformed. They no longer had only circumstantial evidence. They had a direct connection. Laura had confronted Caldwell. Caldwell had been with Laura shortly before she disappeared, and he had motive to stop her. The news shocked Blackwood. People who had defended Caldwell for decades struggled to accept reality. Some refused to believe it. Others admitted they had always felt something was wrong. Old memories began returning. Small moments, strained conversations, things people ignored because they seemed insignificant. A neighbor remembered seeing Caldwell's truck near the farmhouse on the night Laura vanished. A former employee remembered Caldwell cleaning his vehicle late that night. Another resident remembered Caldwell asking questions about the police investigation before anyone had released information. For 40 years, those memories had existed separately. Now they formed a pattern. The investigators understood something important about cold cases. The truth is often not hidden in one dramatic discovery. It is hidden in hundreds of small details waiting to be connected. The search for Caldwell continued. Then came the breakthrough. A detective reviewing old property records found something unexpected. Before leaving Wisconsin, Caldwell had maintained ownership of a small cabin near the northern border, a property he never mentioned, a place not connected to his public life. Investigators believed it was a perfect location for someone trying to disappear. A team was sent immediately. The cabin had been abandoned for several years. Inside, they found old furniture, personal belongings, boxes of documents, and on a shelf covered with dust, a photograph. The photograph showed Laura Bennett, taken shortly before her disappearance. On the back were 3 handwritten words. She knew too much. The discovery sent a shock through the investigation, because it proved Caldwell had been watching Laura before she vanished. But there was something else inside the cabin, Something that would finally answer the question investigators had been asking for 40 years. A hidden metal container buried beneath the floor. Inside were items that connected Caldwell directly to the night Laura disappeared. The case that had remained unsolved since 1980 was finally approaching its final chapter. But Thomas Caldwell was still missing, and investigators knew the clock was running, because the man who had hidden the truth for 40 years was now trying to escape from it. The man who had hidden the truth for 40 years was now trying to escape from it. But investigators had learned something important. Secrets can hide for a long time. They can survive rumors. They can survive silence. They can survive decades of unanswered questions. But once the truth begins to surface, it becomes almost impossible to stop. The evidence inside the cabin changed everything. The metal container was carefully transported to the forensic laboratory. Inside were items that had been untouched for decades. Old photographs, handwritten notes, a damaged watch, a small piece of jewelry identified by Laura's family, and one final document, a document that contained the information investigators had been searching for since 1980. The timeline of Laura Bennett's final night. The notes appear to have been written by Thomas Caldwell himself, not as a confession, not as an apology, but as a record of events he never expected anyone else to read. The investigators studied every line, every date, every reference. The document revealed that Caldwell had been afraid of Laura, not because she was dangerous, because she was close to exposing everything. Laura had discovered the financial records. She had discovered the names. She had discovered that respected people in Blackwood had been involved in illegal activities for years. But Caldwell was not only trying to protect himself, he was protecting others, people with influence, people who had helped to maintain control over the community. The case was no longer about one person. It was about a secret that had survived because many people chose silence. Investigators began identifying everyone connected to the old operation. Some had died. Some had moved away. Some refused to speak. But one by one, the walls started collapsing. A former accountant came forward. He admitted he had helped hide financial records in the late 1970s. He said Caldwell convinced him that nobody would ever discover the truth. He explained that everyone involved believed the farmhouse would remain forgotten forever until Laura Bennett found it. The accountant told detectives something that stayed with them. Laura was not looking for trouble. She was looking for answers. That sentence perfectly described who Laura was. She was not a detective. She was not a police officer. She was someone who believed the truth mattered, and that belief led her into a situation she never expected. The investigation also revealed that Laura had planned to meet someone at the farmhouse on the night she disappeared. Someone she believed could explain the documents she found. But that person never arrived. Instead, Caldwell was there, waiting. The detectives reconstructed the final hours. At approximately 7:30 p.m., Laura left the community center. At 8 p.m., she arrived near the farmhouse. At 8:12 p.m., Caldwell purchased fuel nearby. At 8:30 p.m., Laura recorded the message on cassette tape, and shortly afterward, everything changed. The evidence suggested a confrontation, a struggle, a desperate attempt by Laura to protect the truth she had discovered. But investigators still needed one final piece. They needed Caldwell. Without him, they had evidence. They had witnesses. They had a case. But they wanted answers. They wanted to know why. Why did he choose silence? Why did he allow a family to suffer for 40 years? Why did he pretend to search for a woman he knew he would never find? The search for Thomas Caldwell intensified. Authorities followed every lead, every possible location, every contact. Then, almost unexpectedly, a phone call came. A retired motel owner in northern Michigan contacted investigators. He said a man matching Caldwell's description had stayed at his property under a false name. The man arrived alone. He paid cash. He avoided conversation. But the motel owner recognized him from recent news reports. The photograph of the missing suspect had been everywhere. Investigators moved immediately. The location was surrounded before sunrise. and after 40 years of running, Thomas Caldwell was finally found. The arrest happened quietly. No dramatic chase. No confrontation. Just an elderly man standing outside a small motel room, facing the past he had spent decades avoiding. When investigators approached him, they asked one question. Did you know Laura Bennett? Caldwell remained silent. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he looked at the officers and spoke softly. I knew she would never stop looking. Those words became one of the most chilling moments of the entire case, because they revealed something investigators already suspected. Caldwell understood Laura. He knew her determination. He knew she would not ignore what she found. And he knew that was the reason she became a threat. After the arrest, the investigation entered a new phase. The evidence would finally be presented. The witnesses would finally speak. The hidden story of the Wisconsin farmhouse would finally be revealed. But one question remained. What exactly happened inside that farmhouse on the night Laura Bennett disappeared? The answer was buried in the final evidence recovered from Caldwell's cabin. A final piece of evidence that would force him to confront the truth he had spent 40 years trying to escape. A final piece of evidence that would force him to confront the truth he had spent 40 years trying to escape. The evidence was small, almost insignificant at first glance. A single page torn from a notebook, but investigators knew by then that the smallest details could carry the biggest secrets. The page had been folded carefully and hidden inside the metal container from Caldwell's cabin. The handwriting was different from the notes investigators had already found. It belonged to Laura Bennett. The discovery stunned everyone, because after decades of searching, investigators finally had something written by Laura herself on the final night of her life. The page was not a letter. It was not a goodbye. It was a record. Laura had written down what she discovered inside the farmhouse. Names, dates, amounts of money, details of meetings. She had documented everything because she believed the information was dangerous. At the bottom of the page was one final sentence. If I disappear, someone needs to know why. Those words became the emotional center of the entire investigation, because they proved something investigators had always believed. Laura knew she was in danger. She knew someone wanted her to stop, but she also knew the truth mattered more. The detectives carefully compared the handwriting with Laura's old personal records. The match was confirmed. There was no doubt this was Laura's writing, her final message, her final attempt to make sure the truth survived. The discovery changed the way investigators viewed the case. For 40 years, Laura Bennett had been remembered as a missing woman. Now she was remembered as someone who fought to expose a secret, a person who understood the risk, a person who refused to look away. The prosecution built its case around a timeline that connected every piece of evidence: the diary, the cassette tape, the documents, the witness statements, the recovered note. Together, they created a story that had been hidden for 4 decades. The defense attempted to challenge the evidence. They argued that memories could be unreliable, that old documents could be misunderstood, that time had damaged the investigation. But prosecutors responded with one powerful argument. Time had not destroyed the truth. Time had preserved it. Every piece of evidence had survived long enough to tell its story. During the trial, the courtroom was filled with people who had waited decades for this moment. Laura's family sat quietly, holding photographs, holding memories, holding the pain of 40 years. When the first audio recording from the cassette tape was played, the courtroom became completely silent. Laura's voice filled the room, a voice that had been missing for decades, a voice that everyone thought they would never hear again. Her family later said that moment was both heartbreaking and comforting, because they finally heard her again, not through memories, not through old recordings, but as the person she was, strong, determined, searching for the truth. The prosecution then presented the hidden diary. Daniel Mercer's words showed that Caldwell had been connected to the farmhouse long before Laura disappeared. They showed that he knew about her investigation. They showed that others had helped keep the secret hidden. The courtroom listened as the story unfolded. A story of fear, a story of silence, a story of one woman who discovered something powerful people wanted buried. The most emotional testimony came from Evelyn Hart, the former library employee who had carried Laura's final warning for 40 years. She described the last conversation they had. She remembered Laura's expression, the concern in her voice, the feeling that something was wrong. Then she described the moment she finally decided to speak. "I thought I was protecting myself by staying quiet," Evelyn said. "But I was only protecting the people who hurt her." That statement affected everyone in the courtroom because it represented the greatest tragedy of the case. The truth was not lost. It was hidden by fear. Fear allowed the mystery to continue. Fear allowed a family to suffer. Fear allowed a killer to believe he had escaped. But fear eventually disappeared, and the truth remained. When Thomas Caldwell finally testified, the courtroom watched closely. The man who once stood beside the community as a helper now sat accused of being the person who destroyed it. He looked older, tired, different from the confident businessman people remembered. The prosecutor asked him about the farmhouse, about the diary, about the tape, about Laura. For several minutes, Caldwell avoided answering directly. Then he said something unexpected. "I thought nobody would remember." The courtroom became silent, because those words revealed the mindset behind the entire case. He believed time would erase everything. He believed people would forget. He believed Laura's story would disappear. But he was wrong. The evidence remembered. The witnesses remembered. The family remembered. And eventually, the world remembered. The jury reached its decision after hours of deliberation. The verdict was read inside a courtroom filled with people who had waited 40 years. Thomas Caldwell was found guilty. The Wisconsin 1980 cold case was officially solved. But even after the verdict, one question remained in everyone's mind. How could a secret survive for so long? How could an entire community live beside the truth without seeing it? The answer was painful. Because sometimes the greatest barrier to justice is not a lack of evidence. It is silence. And the story of Laura Bennett proved one final thing. Silence can last for decades, but it cannot last forever. Silence can last for decades, but it cannot last forever. Those words became the final message left behind by the Wisconsin 1980 cold case. A case that began with a disappearance. A case that haunted a community. A case that remained frozen for 40 years. Until Forgotten Diary opened a door nobody expected to open again. The conviction of Thomas Caldwell brought legal closure. But for the people who lived through the investigation, the ending was far more complicated. Because solving a cold case does not erase the years that were lost. It does not bring back the moments that never happened. It does not undo the pain carried by a family waiting for answers. But it does something important. It restores the truth. For Laura Bennett's family, the verdict was not a celebration. It was a moment of quiet reflection. They had spent decades imagining every possible outcome. They wondered if Laura was still alive somewhere. They wondered if someone would eventually come forward. They wondered if the mystery would remain unanswered forever. Now they finally knew. The truth was painful, but uncertainty was over. And sometimes, the end of a painful truth is better than a lifetime of unanswered questions. After the trial, investigators returned to the old farmhouse one final time. The property had become the center of one of Wisconsin's darkest mysteries. A place where secrets were hidden. A place where evidence waited. A place where a young woman searched for answers and never returned home. But now, the farmhouse represented something different. It represented the power of persistence. Because everything that had been hidden eventually came to light. The investigators stood inside the same room where Laura had recorded her final message. They looked at the walls, the floor, the spaces where evidence had remained untouched for decades. And they understood something. The truth had never disappeared. It had been there the entire time, waiting for someone to find it. The diary that changed everything was eventually placed into the evidence archive. A simple notebook. Old. Damaged. Faded. But more powerful than anyone could have imagined. It became one of the most important pieces of evidence in Wisconsin cold case history. Not because it contained a confession, but because it proved something every investigator hoped was true. People can hide the truth, but they cannot destroy it completely. The story of Laura Bennett also changed the way law enforcement approached old investigations. Departments across the state began reviewing forgotten cases. They reopened files. They examined evidence using modern technology. They contacted witnesses who had never been fully interviewed. Because Laura's case showed that answers can exist where nobody thinks to look. The future can solve the past. That became one of the strongest lessons from the investigation. A case from 1980 was solved because investigators in a different generation refused to accept that it was impossible. They used new tools. They asked new questions. They looked at old evidence with new eyes. And they discovered what had been hidden for 40 years. The community of Blackwood also changed. For years, the town had been divided by suspicion. People wondered who knew something, who stayed silent, who protected the secret. The trial finally revealed the truth, but it also forced the community to confront a difficult reality. Sometimes evil does not look dangerous. Sometimes it looks familiar. Sometimes it is someone people trust, someone who smiles, someone who offers help, someone who stands beside you while hiding the truth. That was the most disturbing part of the case. Thomas Caldwell was not a stranger who appeared from nowhere. He was part of the community. He was someone people believed they knew, and that made Laura's story even more powerful, because it showed the importance of questioning, of searching, of refusing to accept the easy explanation. Laura herself became remembered not as a victim, but as someone who followed the truth even when it was dangerous. Her courage became part of her legacy. Students who learn about her story years later often focus on one thing. She was not a detective. She was not an investigator. She was simply someone who believed that people deserved honesty. That belief led her to uncover something hidden. And that same belief eventually helped bring justice. The final documentary about the case ended with images of Wisconsin in autumn, the forests surrounding Blackwood, the empty roads, the old farmhouse disappearing into the distance. Then came a photograph of Laura, smiling, alive, remembered. The narrator's final words carried the weight of 4 decades. For 40 years, a secret remained hidden. For 40 years, a family waited. For 40 years, a community searched for answers. Then one forgotten diary revealed what everyone thought was lost forever. The screen faded. The final message appeared. No evidence is truly forgotten. No story is truly finished. Notru estás beri forever. Because somewhere right now, another old file may be waiting. Another forgotten diary may exist. Another piece of evidence may be sitting quietly in the dark, waiting for someone brave enough to look, waiting for someone willing to ask one more question, waiting for the truth to speak. And when that moment comes, even the oldest cold case can finally be cracked. Even the oldest cold case can finally be cracked. That became the lasting message of Laura Bennett's story, a message that traveled far beyond the borders of Blackwood, Wisconsin, because the case was never only about one disappearance. It was about the power of evidence, the power of memory, the power of people who refused to allow the truth to disappear. For 40 years, the world believed Laura's story had reached a dead end, a missing woman, a forgotten investigation, a file stored away in an evidence room. But behind that closed file was something nobody could see, a hidden connection between the past and the future, a diary waiting in silence, a recording waiting to be heard, a secret waiting to be exposed. The discovery changed the way investigators viewed cold cases forever. Before Laura's case was solved, many people believed time was the enemy. Every year that passed seemed to make the truth harder to find. Witnesses disappeared. Memories faded. Evidence became damaged. But the investigation proved something different. Time could also become an ally, because while people forgot, evidence remained. While rumors changed, records stayed. While memories became uncertain, the truth waited patiently. The detectives who worked the final investigation often said the hardest part was not finding evidence. It was believing that evidence still existed. That was a challenge with every cold case. The temptation to believe that nothing more could be discovered. The temptation to accept that the mystery will remain unanswered. But Laura's story showed what could happen when someone refused to stop searching. The investigators who reopened the case were not the same people who worked on it in 1980. Most of the original detectives had retired. Some had passed away. The town had changed. The world had changed. Technology had changed. But one thing remained unchanged. The question, what happened to Laura Bennett? That question had survived every decade. It survived every false lead. It survived every moment when people believed the answer would never come. And eventually, that question led investigators back to the farmhouse, back to the hidden room, back to the diary, back to the secret that had been waiting all along. After the trial, many people asked how such a secret could remain hidden for so long. How could an entire town fail to discover the truth? The answer was complicated, because secrets do not survive only through lies. They survive through fear. Fear of consequences. Fear of powerful people. Fear of becoming the next target. The investigation revealed that many people in Blackwood had suspected something was wrong, but suspicion was not enough. People needed courage. They needed proof. They needed someone to take the first step. Laura had taken that step in 1980. She had followed the documents. She had asked questions. She had searched where others refused to look. And even after she was gone, her work continued. The diary and recordings prove that. Her investigation did not end the night she disappeared. It continued through the evidence she left behind. One of the most emotional moments after the trial came when Laura's family was allowed to view the recovered materials. For the first time, they saw the documents she had collected. They saw the notes she had written. They saw the evidence that showed what she had been trying to uncover. Her family later said the experience was heartbreaking, but it also gave them something they had not had before: understanding. They finally saw the reason behind her actions. They understood why she had been searching, why she had taken risks, why she believed the truth was worth fighting for. Laura was not chasing danger. She was chasing answers, and that difference mattered. The case also changed how the public viewed forgotten evidence. The diary became a symbol, not because it solved the mystery alone, but because it proved that important information can remain hidden in ordinary places. A notebook, a box, a forgotten room, an old recording. Things people walk past every day without realizing their value. The investigators who studied Laura's case later explained that every object has a story. Every document has a history. Every piece of evidence has a moment when it becomes important. The challenge is recognizing that moment. For 40 years, the diary was just an old notebook hidden beneath the floor. Then one day, it became the key to an entire investigation. That transformation became one of the most powerful lessons from a case. Never assume something is meaningless. Never assume an old file has nothing left to reveal. Never assume a cold case is truly cold, because sometimes the answer is already there, waiting. The legacy of Laura Bennett continued through the people who learned her story. Young investigators studied the case as an example of persistence. Students studied it as an example of courage. Families of other cold case victims saw it as a reason to keep hoping. Because if Laura's story could finally be solved after 40 years, then maybe other stories could find their endings too. The final years of the investigation also revealed something about Daniel Mercer, the man whose diary exposed the secret. For decades, many questioned why he stayed silent, why he waited so long, why he did not come forward when Laura first disappeared. The answer was painful. He was afraid. He believed speaking out would destroy his life. He believed nobody would believe him. He believed the people involved were too powerful. His silence had consequences. But his final decision changed everything. By preserving the diary, Daniel gave investigators a chance to finish what he could not. He gave Laura a voice that had been missing for decades. And that became his final contribution to the truth. The Wisconsin 1980 cold case was no longer just a story about a crime. It was a story about choices. The choice to hide, the choice to speak, the choice to search, the choice to remember. And after 40 years, the truth finally had its moment. The truth finally had its moment. And when it arrived, it changed everything that people in Blackwood thought they knew. For decades, The town had carried the weight of an unanswered question. People remembered the posters, the searches, the interviews, the uncertainty. They remembered the feeling that something terrible had happened, but nobody knew exactly what. Now, the mystery had an answer, but answers do not erase history. They reveal it. And the history of Laura Bennett's disappearance was far more complicated than anyone imagined. The final investigation uncovered not only what happened to Laura, but also how easily the truth can disappear when people choose silence. The case became a warning, not only about crime, but about the danger of looking away. Because the most shocking discovery was not that one person had hidden the truth. It was that the truth had been surrounded by people who had opportunities to reveal it. People who heard rumors. People who noticed strange behavior. People who saw pieces of the puzzle. But they convinced themselves those pieces did not matter. That someone else would speak. That someone else would act. That someone else would find the answer. And while everyone waited for someone else, the years passed. That was the tragedy behind the Wisconsin 1980 cold case. The truth was not destroyed. It was delayed. The detectives who reviewed the case years later often returned to one question. How close were they in 1980? The answer was difficult, because the original investigators had discovered some important details. They had searched the farmhouse. They had questioned Thomas Caldwell. They had collected evidence. But they did not have what investigators had decades later. Modern technology, the restored recordings, the advanced forensic analysis, the connection between documents that once seemed unrelated. The case was not solved because the original investigators failed. It was solved because time gave them tools that did not exist before. That was an important distinction. Cold cases are not always abandoned because nobody cared. Sometimes they remain unsolved because the world is not yet ready to understand the evidence. The diary was the perfect example. In 1980, it would have been a mystery, a notebook without context, a collection of strange writings. But decades later, placed beside the other evidence, it became something else, a map, a timeline, a path leading directly toward the truth. The same words that once seemed meaningless became the foundation of the investigation. Daniel Mercer's fear became evidence. Laura's notes became a final statement. The cassette tape became a witness. The farmhouse became a crime scene again. Everything connected. Everything returned. The case that had been frozen in time started moving again. After conviction, investigators preserved every piece of evidence connected to Laura's story, not only for legal reasons, but because they understood the importance of history. They knew future investigators might learn from it. Future technology might reveal more. Future generations might discover details they could not see. Because every solved cold case creates another opportunity. It teaches people how to search, how to question, how to listen. Laura's story became part of training programs for investigators studying old cases. The lessons were clear. Revisit evidence. Challenge assumptions. Listen to forgotten witnesses. Examine the details everyone ignored. Because sometimes a clue that solves a 40-year-old mystery is the same clue people looked at decades earlier. They just did not know what they were seeing. The old farmhouse eventually became a symbol around Blackwood, not a symbol of fear, a symbol of truth. The building where a secret was hidden became the place where that secret was finally exposed. The walls that once protected silence eventually revealed everything. Residents who once avoided the property began telling a different story. They talked about Laura, not about the crime, about her life. They remembered the woman before the headlines, the librarian who loved books, the friend who helped people, the person who believed every question deserved an answer. That became the most important part of the ending. Laura Bennett was no longer remembered only as a missing person. She was remembered as someone who searched for the truth. Someone who left behind evidence. Someone whose determination continued even after she was gone. The final memorial created in her honor contained a simple message. The truth waits for those who refuse to stop searching. Those words represented everything about the case. Because the investigation was not won by one person. It was won by persistence. By every person who preserved information. By every person who finally spoke. by every person who believed Laura's story mattered. The final interview with the lead detective became one of the most remembered moments after the case closed. When asked what he believed was the most important discovery, many expected him to mention the diary, the recording, the evidence. But his answer was different. He said, "The biggest discovery was realizing she was never forgotten." That sentence explained the entire investigation, because forgotten victims are the ones who are easiest to lose. But Laura was never forgotten. Her family remembered. Her friends remembered. The investigators remembered. And eventually, the evidence remembered too. The Wisconsin 1980 cold case, cracked because a forgotten diary, exposed a deadly secret. But the deeper truth was something larger. The case was solved because people finally listened. They listened to the evidence. They listened to the witnesses. They listened to a voice recorded 40 years earlier, a voice that had been waiting in the darkness, waiting to tell the world what happened. And after 4 decades of silence, Laura Bennett's story was finally complete. Laura Bennett's story was finally complete. But the impact of that story did not end when the courtroom doors closed. It continued through every person who heard it, every family still waiting for answers, every investigator reopening an old file, every person wondering if a forgotten mystery could still be solved. Because the Wisconsin 1980 cold case became something bigger than a single investigation. It became proof that time does not always bury the truth. Sometimes time protects it. The diary remained a symbol of that belief. A simple notebook, hidden beneath an old farmhouse floor, ignored for decades. Yet inside those pages was the information needed to rebuild an entire case. It carried the fears of a man who remained silent. It carried the final evidence of a woman who refused to stop searching. It carried the secret that changed everything. Investigators often describe the diary as a conversation between the past and the present. Daniel Mercer wrote those words in fear. Decades later, detectives read them with purpose. He wrote because he could not speak. They listened because they still believed someone deserved justice. That connection across time became the heart of Laura's story. The investigation also changed the way the town of Blackwood viewed its own history. For years, people wanted to forget. They wanted to move beyond the pain. They wanted the old farmhouse, the missing posters, and the rumors to become distant memories. But the truth cannot be healed by ignoring it. The community eventually learned that remembering was part of justice, not remembering the crime, remembering the person. That difference changed everything. At the annual memorial held years after the case was solved, people gathered not to talk about Thomas Caldwell. They gathered to talk about Laura. They shared stories. They shared memories. They talked about her kindness, her dedication, her belief that every person deserved honesty. The woman who had once been defined by a mystery was finally remembered by the life she lived. That was the ending her family had always wanted. Not just an arrest, not just a conviction, a restoration of her identity. The investigators involved in the case also carried a memory with them. Many of them admitted that Laura's investigation changed their careers. Before the case, some believed that solving a cold case was mostly about finding new technology. Afterward, they understood something deeper. Cold cases are solved by curiosity, by patience, by the willingness to question what others accepted. Technology helped, but determination opened the door. The evidence had existed for decades. The breakthrough came when someone looked at it differently. That became one of the greatest lessons from a case. Sometimes the answer is not hidden. Sometimes it is simply overlooked. The final forensic review of the evidence produced one more surprising discovery. A small detail found on one of the recovered documents. A fingerprint, not a complete print. Not enough to identify someone in 1980. But with modern analysis, investigators confirmed it belonged to Thomas Caldwell. The discovery did not change the outcome of the trial. The conviction was already secure, but it provided one final connection. Another piece proving that Caldwell had been inside the farmhouse. Another confirmation that the evidence had been telling the story all along. The investigators preserved the fingerprint analysis as the final addition to the case file. A reminder that even the smallest mark can survive history. Years later, When journalists asked whether the case should have been solved sooner, investigators gave a complicated answer. They said every investigation exists in its own time. In 1980, they had the tools they had, the knowledge they had, the evidence they could understand. Decades later, they had more, and that combination of past and present created the answer. The original investigators collected the pieces. The future investigators connected them. Together, they solved the mystery. That became the true story behind the headline. Wisconsin 1980 cold case cracked. Forgotten diary exposes a deadly secret. The headline was shocking, but the reality was more human. It was about a family waiting, a community struggling, a detective searching, a diary hidden, a truth surviving. The case also reminded everyone of the importance of preserving evidence, because nobody knows which piece will matter years later. A photograph, a recording, a document, a small sample, a handwritten note. At the moment it is collected, it may seem ordinary, but history can change its meaning. The diary was ordinary until the day it was opened. The cassette tape was forgotten until the day someone listened again. The farmhouse was abandoned until the day investigators returned. Everything had been waiting. The final scene connected to Laura Bennett's story happened on a quiet autumn morning. A detective visited the memorial alone. No cameras, no reporters, no announcement, just a moment of reflection. He placed a copy of the diary beside Laura's photograph, not as evidence, as a symbol, a reminder that behind every cold case is a person. Behind every file number is a life. Behind every unanswered question is someone hoping for the truth. And that morning, standing there, the detective understood something. The case was not solved because the past gave up its secrets. It was solved because people refused to let the past disappear. Because some stories wait, some evidence waits, some truths wait, and when the right moment arrives, they finally speak. They finally speak. And when the truth of Laura Bennett's disappearance was finally revealed, it carried a message that reached far beyond one town, one investigation, or one moment in history. It became a reminder that every unanswered question has a story behind it. Every forgotten file has a reason it was created. Every name written in a report belongs to someone whose life mattered. For 40 years, Laura's name remained attached to a mystery, a photograph on missing person posters, a name in old newspaper articles, a case number stored inside a cabinet. But after the diary was discovered, everything changed. Laura was no longer just a woman who vanished. She became the woman who searched, the woman who uncovered a hidden world, the woman whose determination survived long after she was gone. That was the part investigators wanted people to remember, not only how the case ended, but how it began. A young woman asking questions, a woman who noticed details others ignored, a woman who believed the truth was worth pursuing. Her final investigation was never meant to become a national story. She was not looking for attention. She was looking for answers. And that simple decision changed everything. The old farmhouse became a symbol of that search. For years, it stood empty, weathered, forgotten. People drove past it without thinking. They saw broken windows, faded walls, an abandoned building slowly disappearing into the landscape. But inside those walls was a story waiting to be discovered. The farmhouse had held secrets for decades, documents hidden away, conversations never revealed, evidence nobody knew existed, and most importantly, the final steps of Laura Bennett's search. After the investigation ended, experts examined the farmhouse one final time. They documented every room, every mark, every remaining detail. They wanted future investigators to understand how the location connected to the case, because they knew another lesson had emerged. Places remember, buildings remember, objects remember. Sometimes the truth survives in the places people leave behind. The investigation also changed the way people thought about witnesses. For decades, many people in Blackwood had carried small pieces of information, a conversation, a strange event, a memory from one night. But they believed those details were too small to matter. The case proved them wrong. Because every detail matters when the truth is incomplete. The witness who remembered Caldwell's truck, the employee who remembered the late-night visit, the friend who remembered Laura's fears. Each person held one piece. Together, those pieces created a complete picture. That was the power of persistence. No single discovery solved the case. The diary alone was not enough. The tape alone was not enough. The documents alone were not enough. The truth appeared when everything was connected. That became the foundation of modern cold case investigations. Not searching for one perfect answer, searching for the relationship between many small answers. The years following the trial brought many requests from families of other missing people. They wanted to know if their cases could also be reopened, if old evidence could still matter, if forgotten records could still reveal something. Investigators always gave the same response. Every case is different. Every story has its own path. But hope should never be abandoned too quickly, because Laura Bennett's case proved something important. A case can become cold, but it does not have to remain cold forever. The final archive entry for the investigation was simple. Date closed, evidence preserved, case solved. But behind those words were decades of emotion, 40 years of waiting, 40 years of searching, 40 years of a family wondering if the truth would ever come. The official record was short. The human story was not. That was why the case remained remembered. Not because of the shocking discovery, not because of the arrest, not because of the hidden diary alone. It remained remembered because people saw themselves in it. Everyone understands the pain of unanswered questions. Everyone understands the desire to know the truth. And everyone understands that some things should never be forgotten. The final interview with Laura's family happened several months after the trial. They were asked what they wanted people to remember most. They did not talk about Thomas Caldwell. They did not talk about the crime. They talked about Laura. They talked about her laughter, her kindness, her determination. They said the world spent 40 years asking what happened to her, but they wanted the world to remember who she was. That statement became the final emotional turning point of the story, because justice is not only about finding the person responsible. It is also about honoring the person who was lost. Laura Bennett's life mattered before the investigation. It mattered during the investigation, and it mattered after the truth was finally revealed. The forgotten diary exposed a deadly secret, but it also revealed something else. A truth that had nothing to do with crime. That one person's courage can survive decades. That one person's search can continue after they are gone. That one person's voice can still be heard, even after 40 years of silence. The Wisconsin 1980 cold case was finally cracked. The mystery was finally solved. The secret was finally exposed. But the message remained forever. The truth may wait. The truth may hide. The truth may become buried beneath years of silence. But the truth never truly disappears. The truth never truly disappears. That was a final lesson left behind by the Wisconsin 1980 cold case. A lesson written not only in the pages of Daniel Mercer's forgotten diary, but in every person who refused to let Laura Bennett become just another unsolved name. Because in the end, the case was not solved by one dramatic moment. It was solved by decades of persistence, by evidence that survived, by memories that remained, by people who finally found the courage to speak. The story of Laura Bennett became one of the most powerful examples of why cold case investigations continue. Because behind every old file is a possibility that something has been missed, a possibility that someone knows more than they ever revealed, a possibility that the answer is closer than anyone realizes. For years, investigators had looked at Laura's disappearance as a tragedy without a conclusion. But when the diary was discovered, they realized something important. The case had never been empty. It had been waiting. The evidence was always there. The truth was always there. The only thing missing was a moment when everything connected. That moment came decades later. A forgotten farmhouse, a hidden compartment, a damaged notebook, a single discovery that reopened an entire chapter of history. The phrase cold case cracked became the headline. But behind the headline was a much deeper story. A story about time, about memory, about the human need to know what happened, because uncertainty has a unique kind of pain. It does not end. It follows people. It appears in quiet moments. Every birthday, every anniversary, every time someone asks a question that has no answer. Laura's family lived with that pain for 40 years. They learned how to continue living while carrying something unfinished. They celebrated holidays. They built new memories. They moved forward. But part of them remained in 1980, the night Laura disappeared. The unanswered phone calls, the empty chair, the hope that tomorrow might bring news. When the truth finally arrived, it brought sadness, but it also brought peace, because they no longer had to imagine. They no longer had to wonder. They finally knew, and knowing changed everything. The investigators who solved the case often said the most powerful moment was not the arrest. It was the moment Laura's family heard the recovered recording. Hearing her voice again after 4 decades created an emotion nobody could describe. It was painful, but it was real. For a few moments, Laura was no longer a photograph from an old newspaper. She was alive again, speaking, thinking, fighting for the truth. That moment reminded everyone why cold cases matter. Because victims are not just evidence. They are people. They have voices. They have stories. They have lives that deserve to be remembered. The case also changed the way Blackwood viewed its own history. The town had spent years trying to escape the shadow of the farmhouse. But eventually, people realized that facing the past was the only way to move forward. They began telling Laura's story differently. Not as a story of fear, but as a story of courage. The woman who walked into danger because she believed something was wrong. The woman who left behind clues. The woman whose determination outlived the person who tried to silence her. Her legacy became larger than the crime itself. Years after the investigation ended, a new generation of detectives visited the evidence archive. They studied the case. They examined the diary. They listened to the restored recording. They learned about every mistake, every breakthrough, every moment where someone almost gave up, and they learned the most important lesson. Never assume the truth is gone, because the truth may be hidden. But hidden is not the same as destroyed. That idea became part of cold case training across the region. Investigators were encouraged to revisit old evidence, to question old conclusions, to search for connections that earlier generations could not see. Because technology changes, people change, but the need for justice remains the same. The final chapter of Laura Bennett's story was not written in a courtroom. It was written in the lives changed by what happened, the investigators who learned from it, the families who found hope because of it, the community that learned the importance of speaking up, and the future victims whose cases might one day be solved because someone remembered Laura. Because every solved cold case creates a path for another. Every breakthrough proves another breakthrough is possible. Every answer gives hope to someone still waiting. The old farmhouse was eventually removed. The structure that had held so many secrets was gone. But the story remained. The diary remained. The evidence remained. The memory remained. And perhaps that was fitting. Because the farmhouse was never the true center of the story. Laura was the person who searched, the person who cared, the person who believed the truth mattered. The final words recorded in the official documentary about the case captured everything that happened. 40 years ago, a woman disappeared. 40 years later, a diary revealed why. But the greatest discovery was not finding the secret. It was discovering that the truth had been waiting all along. The screen faded. The final image showed Laura smiling. Not as a victim, not as a mystery, but as a person remembered. A person whose story finally had an ending. And somewhere, in another forgotten evidence room, another old file waited. Another unanswered question remained. Another family hoped. Another truth waited for someone to find it. Because no matter how much time passes, no matter how deep the secret is buried, no matter how long the silence lasts, the truth always finds a way to return. The truth always finds a way to return. That final realization became the legacy of Laura Bennett's case. Not just a solved investigation. Not just another headline, but a reminder that behind every unanswered mystery, there is still a story waiting to be heard. The Wisconsin 1980 cold case had remained silent for 4 decades. But silence was never the same as forgetting. Every year that passed, someone remembered Laura, her family, her friends, the investigators who kept the file, the people who still wondered what really happened on that October night. The world moved forward. Technology changed. Generations changed. The town changed. But the question remained exactly the same. Where did Laura Bennett go? And why did she never come home? For decades, there were no answers, only theories. Some believed she had left voluntarily. Some believed she had been the victim of a random crime. Others believed the truth was connected to the old farmhouse. But without evidence, every theory remained only a possibility. Then the diary appeared. And suddenly, 40 years of uncertainty began to collapse. The discovery proved something investigators had always hoped. That time does not erase everything. Sometimes time protects the evidence until the right person finds it. The diary was not supposed to be discovered. The hidden room was not supposed to be opened. The recording was not supposed to be heard again. But history has a way of revealing what people try to bury. The investigators who handled the case often described the process as putting together a photograph that had been torn apart. At first, there were only pieces: a name, a document, a memory, a recording, a forgotten statement. Each piece seemed incomplete, but slowly the image became clear, and the image revealed a truth that shocked everyone. Laura had been closer to the answer than anyone realized. She had followed the evidence. She had found the secret. She had uncovered the connection between the farmhouse and the people who wanted it hidden. Her final days were not random. They were the result of a search for answers that someone desperately wanted to end. The investigators also discovered more about Laura's personality through her notes. She was careful. She was organized. She documented everything. She understood that information could disappear, that memories could change, that people could deny what they once knew. So she wrote things down. She preserved details. She created a trail that remained long after she was gone. In many ways, Laura became her own investigator. She left behind the evidence needed to tell her story. That was what made the case so remarkable. The person who needed justice most had unknowingly helped build a path toward it. After the trial, many people asked whether Thomas Caldwell ever admitted the full truth. The answer remained complicated. Even after conviction, Caldwell never provided a complete explanation. He offered limited statements. He avoided discussing certain details. He never fully explained why he chose to protect the secret for so long. But investigators believed they understood the reason: control, fear, and the belief that time would eventually erase everything. It was a mistake many people make. They believe time makes people forget. They believe old evidence loses power. They believe unanswered questions eventually disappear. But Laura's case proved the opposite. Time does not always destroy evidence. Sometimes it preserves it. The diary survived. The recording survived. The documents survived. The memories survived. And eventually, they all came together. The final investigation report contained hundreds of pages, thousands of details. But the heart of the case could be explained in one sentence. A woman searched for the truth, and decades later, the truth found its way back. That sentence became the reason Laura's story continued to be shared. Because the case was not only about what happened, it was about what came after. The courage of people who finally spoke. The determination of investigators who refused to give up. The family who waited. The evidence that survived. The truth that returned. Years after the case was closed, a new memorial was placed near the location where Laura's journey began. Not a memorial about the crime. A memorial about her life. People left flowers, letters, personal messages. Some came from strangers who had only learned her story through documentaries. They wrote that Laura's story reminded them that every person deserves justice. Every family deserves answers. Every victim deserves to be remembered. And every cold case deserves another look. Because somewhere, another diary may be hidden. Another recording may be waiting. Another forgotten clue may still exist. And somewhere, another family may still be hoping that one day someone will open the right box, search the right room, ask the right question, and finally discover what happened. That was the greatest lesson left behind by Laura Bennett. Never stop searching. Never assume the truth is gone. Never believe that time has won. Because even after 40 years, even after decades of silence, even after everyone thought the answers were lost, the truth was still there, waiting for the moment when someone would finally listen. That was a hidden power behind the Wisconsin 1980 cold case. For decades, the truth remained trapped inside forgotten places. A hidden compartment beneath a damaged floor, a box covered in dust, a recording stored away from the world, a diary written by someone who believed nobody would ever read it. But every secret has a weakness. Every lie leaves behind a trace. And every attempt to bury the truth creates the possibility that one day someone will uncover it. The investigators who reopened Laura Bennett's case understood this better than anyone. They knew they were not simply solving an old crime. They were repairing a broken story, a story that had been interrupted, a story that had been left unfinished, a story that belonged to Laura. The final stages of the investigation revealed details that changed how people remembered the case. For years, the public believed Laura was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, but the evidence showed something different. She was not an accidental victim. She was someone who discovered something dangerous, someone who followed the evidence when others ignored it, someone who walked toward the truth while others walked away. That made her story even more powerful, because Laura was not searching for a mystery. She was searching for answers. The documents she collected showed a pattern. She noticed missing information. She noticed names that appeared in unexpected places. She noticed financial records that did not match official reports. She noticed things that others dismissed. And that was exactly what made her dangerous to the people hiding the secret. Not because she had power, not because she had influence, but because she paid attention. The final investigation also revealed how close the truth came to disappearing forever. Several pieces of evidence were almost destroyed. The farmhouse was scheduled for demolition. The diary was almost lost beneath the floor. The cassette tape was damaged beyond normal recovery. The documents were fading. The witnesses were aging. The window to solve the case was closing. Investigators later admitted that if the discovery had happened just a few years later, the outcome might have been completely different. That realization changed the way many people viewed old cases. Because every unsolved case is a clock, not a visible clock, but a real one. A clock measured by time, by memory, by the survival of evidence. The Laura Bennett investigation became a race against that clock. And somehow, after 40 years, the right people arrived at the right moment. The final evidence review also revealed another heartbreaking detail. Among Laura's personal notes was a page describing her hopes for the future. She wrote about leaving Blackwood someday. She wrote about traveling. She wrote about helping more people. She wrote about a life she wanted to build. Those words reminded everyone that Laura was more than the investigation, more than the evidence, more than the mystery. She was a person with dreams, a person with plans, a person whose future was stolen. That became one of the most emotional parts of the case, because solving a cold case is not only about discovering what happened, it is about remembering what was lost. The people who knew Laura often said the same thing. She had a way of making people feel heard. She asked questions. She listened. She cared. And those qualities eventually became the reason her story survived. She spent her final days searching for the truth. Decades later, the truth was finally searching for her. The final documentary about the case ended with a simple image. The old diary resting beside Laura's photograph. Two objects separated by 40 years. One representing the past. One representing the person who never gave up. Together, they told a complete story. A story of silence. A story of courage. A story of justice. The narrator's final words became the closing message remembered by everyone who followed the case. Some mysteries disappear because nobody cares enough to search. But some mysteries survive because someone refuses to forget. Laura Bennett's story survived because the truth was always waiting. The investigation file was eventually closed. The evidence was archived. The courtroom proceedings ended. But the story continued. Because stories like Laura's do not disappear after justice is served. They remain as reminders. Reminders that victims have names. That families deserve answers. That forgotten evidence can still speak. That time does not always win. The Wisconsin 1980 cold case was solved because one forgotten diary exposed a deadly secret. But the deeper truth was much larger. The case was solved because someone opened the door. Someone looked closer. Someone asked one more question. And sometimes, one more question is all it takes to change history. One more question is all it takes to change history. That was the final lesson hidden inside the Wisconsin 1980 cold case. A question asked too late. A question ignored for too long. A question that finally found its answer after 4 decades of silence. Because every investigation begins with a question. What happened? Who was responsible? Why did nobody see it sooner? But the most important question is often the simplest. What did we miss? For 40 years, people searched for Laura Bennett. They searched forests. They searched roads. They searched abandoned buildings. They searched through rumors and possibilities. But the answer was never found because nobody had the complete picture. Pieces existed everywhere. The problem was that nobody knew how those pieces connected. The diary changed that. It connected the past to the present. It connected forgotten memories to physical evidence. It connected Laura's final investigation to the truth she was trying to uncover. And suddenly, a mystery that had remained impossible began to make sense. The investigators who worked on the final phase of the case often said the most surprising part was not discovering new evidence. It was discovering old evidence that had been waiting all along, evidence that had been ignored, evidence that had been misunderstood, evidence that had been sitting quietly, waiting for someone to recognize its importance. The diary was the perfect example. For decades, it was just a notebook, a collection of thoughts, a collection of fears, a collection of unfinished sentences. But when investigators placed it beside the recovered documents in the restored cassette tape, it became something much greater. It became a map leading back to the night everything changed. The night Laura entered the farmhouse. The night she discovered the secret. The night someone decided the truth had to disappear. The investigation revealed that Laura's greatest strength was also the reason she became a target. She noticed things, small things, things other people overlooked, a missing signature, a change record, a document that did not match another document, a name that appeared where it should not have appeared. She understood that the truth was often hidden inside details. And she was right. The details were there, waiting. The final months after the conviction were filled with reflection. People who had followed the case for years looked back at the original investigation. They wondered how different things could have been. Could Laura have been saved? Could someone have spoken sooner? Could the truth have emerged earlier? Those questions remained impossible to answer. But one thing was certain. The people who stayed silent carried the weight of knowing they could have changed the outcome. That became another painful lesson from the case. Silence does not always protect people. Sometimes silence protects the wrong people. For decades, fear allowed the secret to survive. Fear kept witnesses quiet. Fear kept questions unanswered. Fear allowed someone to believe he had escaped forever. But eventually, fear lost its power. Because truth is patient. It does not need to be loud. It does not need attention. It simply waits for the right moment. And when that moment arrives, it can change everything. Years later, investigators still receive messages from people who had watched documentaries about Laura's story. Some were from families with their own unanswered questions. Some were from retired officers who wondered about old cases. Some were from ordinary people who realized they might know something important about a mystery they thought was already forgotten. And that was perhaps the greatest impact of the case. It encouraged people to speak, to remember, to reconsider what they thought they knew. Because one person's forgotten memory could become another person's breakthrough. One old photograph could become evidence. One conversation could become the missing piece. The Wisconsin 1980 cold case proved that every story deserves another look. Every victim deserves another search. Every question deserves another attempt at an answer. The final evidence report ended with a sentence that investigators later described as fitting. Case resolved. Truth established. But for those who knew Laura, the story was never only about a solved case. It was about a person, a daughter, a friend, a woman who believed that truth mattered. The final image shown in the documentary was not the farmhouse, not the courtroom, not the evidence. It was Laura's photograph. A photograph taken before anyone knew her name would become part of a mystery, before the headlines, before the investigation, before the years of waiting. Just Laura, a person with a future, a person with dreams, a person who deserved to be remembered. And as the screen faded, one final message appeared. 40 years of silence could not erase one woman's search for the truth. One forgotten diary could not bring back the past. But it could finally reveal what happened. And that was the ending of the Wisconsin 1980 cold case. Not a story about how a secret stayed hidden, but a story about how the truth survived. Because no matter how much time passes, no matter how carefully someone hides the evidence, no matter how many years a question remains unanswered, there's always a chance that someone will look again, a chance that someone will listen again, a chance that one forgotten clue will finally speak. And when it does, the silence ends.